Welcome to my YouTube channel. The video you're watching is not on the list you see on your first slide. The one with the big red arrow above it is the first one I did a couple of years ago at RootsTech Genealogy Seminar in Salt Lake City. As you can see, it's still fairly popular. It's had 6,000 views. And the other four to the left of it, you will see, are a series that I did of 1-hour presentations. And the numbers are in backwards order on this list, so you'd want to watch class 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4 to get the whole series of how to understand what we're trying to do today. But this presentation is a little different. This presentation is done for a group of people who may or may not know anything about DNA. And we sort of titled it, the host did, "You May Not Be Who You Think You Are." And we're going to go through how you know if you're related to DNA, what the DNA tests are, what DNA test will not tell you, the newest in DNA research, and of course we will accentuate the Y500 that is now available from Family Tree DNA. Welcome to November of 2018 and a presentation I will be doing tomorrow at the group called Discover You, which is being held at Paradise Valley Estates. And if you were there, you will see this is different than what you get in person. This presentation will not have any interruptions for questions and will cover probably more slides than you will have seen at the meeting. So I hope this helps you and learn more about what we are talking about. There are 3 major types of tests being given today and 5 major companies giving them. The Autosomal DNA, or as Ancestry.com calls it, the everything test, is being offered by 5 companies, as you can see on the slide. And the other 2 types, which are the older types that are specific for specific lines, your male line or your female line, are the FTDNA and the yDNA. And we'll talk some further on about the yDNA. The mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA as I've called it, won't be discussed much further. So Ancestry is the big company out there today. They have 20 million people tested. Family Tree DNA is the smallest, but the originator of the whole idea and the tools that we use. And 23andMe is the company that's doing primarily medical, but they have a couple of million people test also. This is the current front page for Ancestry, where you can see they have their test on sale for $59. And the main reason I recommend one take this test, no matter what other test you take, is you get the chance to match 20 million people who have also tested. And if you match closely, you want to get in touch with those people very much, because they may even have that family Bible you're looking for. They may have a picture of you as a baby. In genealogy, we're always trying to find out where those things are that describe our family history. Your closest relatives will have those items. So don't hesitate to take this test no matter what your goal is in your genealogical pursuit. And this is one of the pages from the 23andMe website. You'll see they offer their product in 2 ways. One, just an ancestry test, which is what you saw on the previous page. The other one gives you health results and what you're likely to have in the way of predisposed genetic future events. In my case, I haven't spent a lot of time in this area because I'm not very encouraged by it. It says, for example, that I will not have male pattern baldness, nor will I have belly fat, and I'm almost bald, and I have a 44-inch waist. So much for that fun. One of the newer companies that's really trying hard and giving us great products is MyHeritage.com. They had a conference for people who use DNA products in Oslo this last weekend. It was, of course, on their time zone, so it was given between 1 a.m. and 8 a.m. But they're releasing the videos of each lecture on their blog. And the address is at the bottom of this slide. And this particular one is a really good hour presentation. The gentleman in the picture is the guy, Gilipad, who actually started the company. He's born in Israel. He's a citizen of Israel. And he's focused on European ancestry for Israeli people. Now you'll remember that our title is "You May Not Be Who You Think You Are." Here's a quote out of a newspaper article. Most revelations don't result in lawsuits, but not every family is delighted to find out they have a new relative. More than half of the NPE, which is non-parental event, members have had the door slammed in their face, says St. Clair. People who want them to go away, and they say things like, "Why are you doing this? Why are you airing dirty laundry? This is a secret you shouldn't be sharing. It hurts because nobody wants to feel like a dirty secret. We're not trying to stir up trouble or trying to wreck a family. We just want to know who we are." One of the things you need to understand when you do these tests is you really don't want to do a test. You'll find that you end up testing other people who you're related to for various reasons. And what does that cost? How many tests will you do? Well, I know of a doctor out of Oregon who's done over 600 tests of his relatives. So he's got a lot of contact and a lot of family. But the least you'll probably do is yourself and your parents, if you're lucky enough to have them alive, plus your mom and dad of your spouse and your spouse. And that would just be for the beginning study of family health, like a 23andMe. So if you did that at $200, which is their package for health plus ancestry, times 6 would be $1,100. So we're talking about some serious investing of money here. So you want to do some serious thinking about what you're trying to find out, what you're trying to accomplish. Taking one test usually leaves you with more questions than answers. I try to keep up with the literature and the newly published books so I can understand that which I'm still not understanding fully. This particular book, Who We Are and How We Got Here by David Reich, was published this last summer. And it talks about many things, but the biggest thing it talks about is what improvements are needed in the labs and in the methods. And it talks about how the old methods that people have been using up until this last summer are not good enough. They're not accurate. And to give you an idea of what he's pointing out, prior to his new methods of working, which he describes in great detail in his book, in the past, the educational institutions were moving very slowly at testing at the higher level the archaeological remains. And you'll see in 2014 they got 38 in the whole year. 2015 they got 26 in the whole year. That's all colleges combined. With the new methods that Reich has discovered in 2017, he did 3,000 by himself. And one of his big breakthroughs that nobody else seems to be talking about yet is everybody actually has 4 kinds of DNA, 4 things in their DNA, 4 people, 4 types of ancestry. And when you look for one type of ancestry with them blend together, you don't get a good answer. And there is no race gene. Most of DNA, especially anthropology, has done away with the concept of race and saying that's a sociological construct, it's not biology. And so that the only part of anthropology that hasn't done away with the term race is that with criminology, because they say the police departments are heavily invested in using current terminology for describing people, like whether they're African American or Hispanic or whatever. Another very good book, it's a big one, 500 pages or more, by Carl Zimmer, entitled She Has Her Mother's Laugh, The Powers, Perversions, and Potentiality of Heredity. As you can see by the title, he's trying to figure out what is it we inherit through DNA? And one quote by him says the first test didn't become commercially available till 2007. He's talking there about the ancestry type test. We were doing other tests before that. There isn't research on the long-term psychological effect of getting bad DNA news, says science writer Carl Zimmer, author of the newly released book She Has Her Mother's Laugh. The power, perversions, and potential of heredity. But he adds, there's evidence that some people maybe end up grappling with test results for a long time, especially if they didn't prepare themselves for the possibility of a surprise. And in the vein of the couple of quotes I've given you so far, here's some current books worth reading. The Family Tree Guide to DNA Testing and Genetic Genealogy is a paperback, done by Blaine Bettinger. It's available everywhere, Amazon and everything. It's not expensive. It was published 2 years ago. How to Do a Y-DNA Study, Next Generation, which we'll be talking about later, is a book done by me this last December. Who We Are and How We Got There, and She Has Her Mother's Laugh are the two books I just mentioned. All of these books are available widely in the bookstores. Anything you want to get, they're there. And I encourage you to look for new books. What I do is I go to Amazon.com, go to detailed search in books, and say show me by publication date. And I can see the books that are about to come out and choose the one I want to read. But in this particular project, let's talk about what you actually get, what I've actually gotten. In my case, I have a guy named Casper Rader. He's our brick wall. He had the usual bunch of children. I managed with genealogy to find living direct male descendants to test, 4 of us. Each one came from a different son of Casper Rader. And we don't know where Casper Rader came from. We just know he got off a ship in 1750 in Philadelphia. Here's the family tree chart. You'll see at the top Casper and 3 of his sons, Philip, Henry, and Daniel. Down in the middle, you'll see another Henry had Andy and Reuben. And at the bottom of each one of those, you'll see the people we tested. These people had a unique, probably not that unique, but they had a very good, for my purposes, history. The chart, the map you see is with Kentucky in green. The family settled primarily in East Tennessee. But one of the sons married a Quaker girl who did not want to be around slavery, so they moved north, as you can see, up to Dayton, Ohio. Another son was looking for land and experience and all that, so he moved to Madison and then on into Texas, where the rest of the family stayed in Greenville, Tennessee, that county. And so we have 3 pools of Rader DNA that were far enough apart that they couldn't do any cross-pollinating. So again, we're testing the people on the bottom, the people who are alive, who should contain the same Y chromosome as Casper does, because the scientists tell us a father passes his Y chromosome to his sons unchanged. So the sons at the bottom should have what the father at the top had. Back in 2012, which is hard to believe we're saying back in 2012, as you know, about 7 years ago now, 6, we had some utilities to deal with a smaller number of tests we had. We tested 37 markers and thought that was really enough. And this report is 2 reports on one screen. The left half says showing you how far you're apart in theoretically generations or genetic distance. The right part is how far that would be in DNA in years, chronological years. So I took those people, those candidates, and you'll see the green background boxes on the right over here. They show 150 years between the different people, Mike, Bob, Alton, Earl, and me. So either way you go, we're all 150 years apart. And so that's the tool we used to work with. We still do on STIRs, which there's a lecture I'll show you that you can get knowledge on what a STIR is as opposed to a SNP. And you can see the web address at the bottom where you would go to get to this tool. Now, if we move forward to the present time, this is a cover of a book I did on how to do a next generation DNA testing, which is using the new SNP, big Y, Y-fold, and other such things. And it shows you on the left that I've done 29 tests, and then I did this series of tests to do the big Y study, which included the same group of people. And if you look closely, you'll see the top half. There's on the right-hand side below the gold line, there's 4 green squares. One is each row for each one of the 4 of us, and it's how many SNPs we have difference between us. And the far edge is how many years apart our common ancestor probably is. The bottom part below the dark orange line, burnt orange, whatever you call that, you'll see some arrows. The top blue and purple are showing you back in time from way back in the beginning that we're in a subgroup called R207. But further down in that tree, our DNA test differentiated it into a more detailed matching, which is a location with a lighter green arrow, and it says RFGC35930. So that's the name of the location on the DNA where we have a most common location. And it says that location was probably created around 2,900 years ago, which is the yellow arrow. And way out there at the end, the amount of time between us and our common ancestor is about 400 years, is what it says. Now, what does it cost to get this kind of testing? The top row of tests, the upper left one is the one we just showed, and not just showed, the screen where we had the table, where we had 37 markers. It costs you $169 per person to get that test. If you go over to the far right, it costs $649 to get the big Y500, which is the expert test that we talk about as being the end-all be-all, much better than Ancestry's Everything test. And down at the bottom, if you want to get Ancestry's Everything test also, this is not it. This is a test on the mother line, the mtDNA, the mitochondria, which is what females give to all of their children. And here's another description of buying packages. Do you want just the test like Ancestry, which is called Family Finder from Family Tree DNA? Or the second one is Family Finder plus Y37. The next one down is the mtDNA full plus Family Finder. And the bottom one is one of each of the 3. And here's what kind of prices they offer at their sale time. This is last Christmas. And you don't see the big Y by itself because at that time you had to take other tests first. But you can see the 37 marker on the left was 129 instead of 169. And if we go further, on National DNA Day this year, April 25th, we had the big Y available by itself for regular price $7.99, on sale for $6.49. So you can see it's $150 per person lower if you wait for the sale. So I don't know about you, I wait for the sales. So the mtDNA is something you can get at Family Tree DNA. You can also get the Y-DNA. This is the only company that offers these tests right now. And then, of course, the largest database of Y-DNA would be through this carrier, Family Tree DNA. And how far are we getting around the country, around the world for matches? It currently has people from 90 different countries. That's 90. And you'll see 1,500 in October of this year from the USA, and then over 100, like 150 down to 115 on a lot of other popular countries. And you notice you don't see Israel, you don't see Germany, because those countries have outlawed DNA tests. They did it way back in the beginning when they had no idea what they were talking about. Okay, let's go back now to the test Ancestry offers, the one they call the Everything test, the one called Relative Finder by Family Tree DNA. There's a danger in looking at what they call matches. Anything below 15 centimorgans is not real reliable. A good explanation of that is if you think about the where do you get your DNA? You get half of your DNA from your mother and half of your DNA from your father. So if you think about that for a moment, that means all the DNA you have came from one of your parents. And therefore, if anybody matches you, they have to match your parents because that's where you got your DNA from. So Blaine Bettinger, who's the genetic genealogist mentioned in this web address, has the luxury of having both his parents alive and has tested them. So he did a study on his 6,000 matches at Ancestry. And he found that after he got done separating, okay, who matches mom? Okay, now of the people that don't match mom, of those remainders, how many match dad? And then when you get done, how many do I have left now that didn't match either one? And he found 1,500, or 1/3 of the tests, did not match either one. Therefore, they're false matches, which basically means they're matching because they're humans, not because they're unique people. That's what we're guessing. As the science gets better, we may know more. So basically, the rule he started out with in the beginning was, if it's below 10 centimorgans, don't waste your time. It's probably a good chance that it's a fake match. So again, the autosomal danger, autosomal meaning the test that's everything, that's the one test, the AtDNA, the everything test, the ancestry test. If you get the test from any place other than family tree DNA, it's an autosomal test. And so he found that if it's less than 7 centimorgans, 59% of the people that are under 7 centimorgans did not match either parent. And between 7 and 10, 27 did not match either parent. If it's greater than 10 centimorgans, 93% shared one of the parents. Greater than 15 centimorgans, 98%. So basically, stay away from the small matches in the autosomal everything test. So what can we do with the large segments? We just looked at this chart. Let's go into the big Y for a minute. I don't know how much time we got. You guys in the live performance, we're probably about running out of time right about here. But the big Y, you have a couple of steps to it. You've got two things you're measuring, SNPs and STIRs, which will be explained in detail in the webinars that are up on the front screen, the first screen I showed you. You can figure out with the STIRs, using 144 years between new SNPs, you can look at the haplotrees, which tell you where people came from. But when you get down to the end of it, your results from the family tree DNA are reported in this manner. And you'll see in the lower right-hand corner, this particular person has a terminal SNP of Y131075, and he has 2 people that match him there. At the next step up, he has 11. Then he has 30 and 31. In my case, I have 3, 3, and 3. And this again is that cover off my book, showing you where the red arrow is, that the common ancestor that we all 4 should share is 275 years ago. Now, how do you get to that? When I took the test and got my test back, I had just myself in that new location, and it showed that I probably had almost 3,000 years between me and my closest ancestors that I tested. And you see also that there's a bunch of SNPs down in the bottom 2 rows. There's 15 and 22 SNPs between me and other 2 people. This is before they find out which ones we all share. Once they find that you share it, they move it from the bottom part up to the top part and add 100 and some odd years for each one they move. So that brings that 2884 down. So for example, if you take 25 SNPs times 150 years, you get a good sized number. If we go to a 3 test, there's me and 2 other people, that number came down to 389 years. You can see the red arrow pointing on the gold line. But if we get the 4th test, it comes down to 269 years. So now we know with a pretty high degree of confidence that 269 years ago there should be one man that we all came from. And if you look at Casper and his birth and death date, that was 285 years. Not bad for government work. Okay, now let's look at these tests again. Sort of a review and more definition. If you take either the Y-DNA test, which is the Y-DNA comes from your fathers, straight up that male line, or the mtDNA test, that's up your mother's line. And they assign a haplogroup for those. That's a name for a group of people, a kind of people, a location that the anthropologists have found. And what you'll find first with those two tests at the very rootest area, if you don't match with the crude test where you don't have details, then you're not related to that line. If you do match, you might be related to that line. Okay, how do you decide what test to take? And who should take that test? Remember, I found 3 other people to take the test. And in each case, where you look in your genealogy tree, you'll find a place where you have a question or a problem. With the do you match or do you not match, and with the various tests, you can improve your confidence level of how accurate are you. So what's the difference between a big Y test and a Y500 test? What are haplogroups and where did they come in specific places? Well, let's look at how do we answer some of this stuff. Last spring, like I told you on the first slide, I gave a set of lectures, 4 of them, 1 hour each, for the Placer County Genealogy Society. They have a place in Loomis Library, just 15 miles north of Sacramento, where the first and third Thursday every month they give 2 hours of DNA training. So my first 2 series in that series, the first one was just the introduction stuff. And again, remember, we're talking about 2 hours of lecture as opposed to the half hour we're doing tonight. The second lecture, I talk about what are stirs and describe what is a stir. The third lecture, I talk about what is a SNP. And the fourth lecture in that series, I bring it all together and talk about how to use the big Y-DNA. So there's also another lecture there from 2014, which gives you all complete detailed background of what DNA was about up until that time. So there's 5 hours of training there, and this video will be there by the time you're looking at it. And I hope that will help you get into this in more detail. But don't hesitate to contact me and take more classes. The more you learn, the better you'll do on this stuff. Here's some of the classes they were teaching there. And these are basically talking about autosomal DNA. This first 7 are talking about the ancestry everything test, so to speak. You can see there's 7 2-hour lectures they did to start out with. Now they've gone for over a year, about 1.25 years, with 2 of these lessons a month. So if you go 52 weeks, 2 lessons, no, they don't go 52, they go 26, right? 2 lessons each, which is 52 hours. So and they haven't repeated anything. So they've gone 52 hours of training on how to use the autosomal DNA. Let's talk a little bit about what is a haplogroup. You see, this comes from a website called Ancestral Findings. And they have places in there where you can actually look up your haplogroup to find out where it came from. And you can see it's at haplogroup.org. It's part of Europedia.com. There's also another place on Family Tree DNA where you can look up your mtDNA haplogroups. Here's a new tool from the website called Phylographer. Now, a phylographer is a person who specializes in trying to figure out where certain DNA came from. And these numbers are the names of tests done by anthropologists and where that particular remains of a person was found. There's a lot of work going on in this area, but it's not complete enough to get what we want. But these are some of the new tools they're trying to use to figure out the migration patterns of these various peoples of different types. And here's another tool just to give you an idea from Family Tree DNA. This is haplogroup H10 and its subsections, and that would be mtDNA type. And you can see H10, or H should we say, is mostly European women. So we're dividing that number of lines, what is it, about 20? Dividing all the women in Europe into 20 sections. That doesn't do us a whole lot of good for DNA genealogy, but if we don't match, then we know we're not related. If we do match, we might be related.